Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Listeners, here we go. We back. Unfortunately, my Pasho, the Mike, is not here. He's under the weather. If you listen to this episode, Pasho, I love you and miss you. And we'll get you on the next episode. But can't believe it still. We are season 5, episode 6 with Aneta Waclaw coming from Mexico City. If you are new to this podcast, first of all, thanks for giving us a shot. Like I said, hey, we're over 150 episodes or so listened to in, I think it's 58 countries and 780 something cities now. So thanks if you're a regular listener, appreciate you. But again, back if you're new, this podcast is part of a nonprofit, and the nonprofit is called C4 Leaders. And we're the only nonprofit to utilize the pizza making process to create space for our companions to be seen, heard, and loved. We also write children's books. We use the most amazing handmade, hand-tossed sourdough pizza to bring out the best in each other. So if you're interested in checking us out in that space, just go to pizzadays.org to support our important work. So here we go. First of all, the best place you can find our guest is through her site, and it's bio-site, Nourished Inside Out. I'm going to spell that out, but bio.site/Nourished Inside Out. So about our guest, Aneta is a passionate writer, podcast host, and advocate for personal growth and healing. As a creator of Nourished Inside Out and the author of Blooming with Self-Love, she empowers women to rebuild their confidence and embrace self-love after toxic relationships. Drawing from her own experiences and extensive knowledge in emotional healing, Aneta blends neuroscience, holistic wellness, and self-care strategies to guide others towards transformation. Her work is a blend of heart-centered wisdom to help individuals break free from past pain and step into a more fulfilling life. When she's not writing or hosting her podcast, you can find her exploring nature and the outdoors, capturing beauty through photography and curating meaningful resources to support her community. Aneta, thanks for sharing your many gifts with the people you serve, for having the courage to share your story, and for being our guest on Life's Essential Ingredients. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I love doing these introductions, but every time I do them, I'm just like taken back that there's people like you that are doing some great work in the world just to make it a little bit better, kind of like we're trying to do with, pizza one slice at a time. But I'm kind of curious, and we'll get into some stuff, but I always love breaking down people's intro, like curating meaningful resources to support our community. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I actually got introduced to personal development and self-help education when I was finishing high school. So I have a previous background as a dancer, and I was in ballet class as young as I can remember, from 5 years old all the way to 18 or 19 years old. And I remember there were so many things that I struggled with internally: emotional stability, maturity, and just the way to how to cultivate positive thoughts and how to be more optimistic. So then I remember one time I was in ballet class, and this girl recommended this book, The School of Greatness. And she said, hey, like if anybody's into motivational stuff or personal help, you should really read this book. It's really got some great tips in there. And it was by Lewis Howes. And I remember I read that book and I got addicted to listening to his podcasts because he was spreading so much education about different people he would interview, whether they were psychologists, therapists, doctors, nutritionists. I was just learning so much and I was taking it all in. And over the past couple of years, I've endured a lot of challenges in my personal relationships. And since overcoming them and getting out of them, I have been able to heal and grow. And now that's what I do with my podcast, is interview people in the areas that I once needed help with while I was in those relationships.
Ah, Man, I love it. And I love just your self-care strategies. And obviously we'll get into all this stuff, holistic wellness. And then, yeah, I'm fascinated with neuroscience. I know you're not aware, but I'm a nurse is what I did for 33 years. And so I'm big into all the same stuff that you're into, and which is kind of the intent of this podcast as well is just to try and help people figure out, hey, what are those essential ingredients in their life and how can you kind of enhance them? So really cool, really cool. Hey, so you're a rookie on the show. Welcome again, but we always have a thought of the day. And this is a long one. So you're going to have to really think and say, why the heck did this guy pick this? And the pressure is all on me, but because we're 100% on these. And I told you we're over 150 episodes. That means 150 or so times I've picked these suckers. And the guess has been, man, that is like spot on. And so hoping that we can continue with that. So here we go. It's from Joseph Campbell, who's a writer and a professor, but he's taken from Anitsky's kind of thoughts and kind of blending them in with his. And so Nitsky was the one who did the job for me. At a certain moment in his life, the idea came to him of what he called the love of your fate. Whatever your fate is, whatever the hell happens, you say, this is what I need. It may look like a wreck, but go at it as though it were an opportunity, a challenge. If you bring love to that moment, not discouragement, you will find the strength is there. Any disaster you can survive is an improvement in your character, your stature, your life. What a privilege. Then, when looking back at your life, you will see that the moments which seem to be great failures followed by wreckage were the incidents that shaped the life you have now. The crisis throws you back. And when you're required to exhibit strength, it comes. Why would I pick that one for you?
Because I actually really like that, because it talks about going through challenging times and having the resilience to get back up and try again and to not take things personal. Because within these last 4 or 5 years, I have faced a lot of setbacks, whether it was personal relationships or career-wise. I was faced with a lot of setbacks that forced me to be resilient and to not give up.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you're saying we're still good. Our streak continues.
Yes, it does.
All right. All right. Hey, and so just so you know, I'm not looking down at my phone. When my head's down, I'm taking notes. And
Sure.
Mike and I started this show actually right at COVID time, and just to try and learn and connect and stuff, and always just try and help one person. And usually that one person is me. And so I just love to learn, but I'm taking notes all the time. But I want to ask you something, because something was interesting in what you said. And I just want you to go at it a little bit more, but to not take things personal, because that's a little bit tricky to me, and there's accountability for our actions. And I know that's not what you're talking about, but then there's also like, yeah, hey, that person's having a challenge and that has nothing to do with me, So when you say don't take things personal during these challenging times, what does that mean to you?
So when somebody is not being kind to you, or if somebody is being like giving you opposition, it's never on you. We have to realize that we don't know what the other person is going through or what they're dealing with in that moment. And once you make that mindset shift, you really don't take things personal. I was in a really unhealthy relationship for about 3 years, and I was really naive and I was really in my bubble. And I was always kind because I was taught, if you give kindness, you get kindness back. If you give bitterness, you get bitterness back. So when I went into this relationship and I brought my best, I was always kind. I was a giver. I was trying to be nurturing as much as possible, but I wasn't getting that back. And what I've been learning on my healing journey after that relationship is that it had absolutely nothing to do with me, because Every time I was kind, he would be bitter to me. Every time I would give, he would try to take. And it's just a lot of unhealed trauma on his end that I had no idea about. So there's really nothing that I could have done in those moments. And if somebody cuts you off in traffic, it's you don't know what kind of day they're having, so don't take it personal, wish them the best and wish them to have a good day. And I think once we get into that mindset shift, things really do flip.
Mm. I totally agree. And not to sound crazy, and I'm going to get us back on track here in a second. But what advice would you have? And this is a little bit of a tricky question, because to me, in listening to you, again, I'm a nurse, and when you're doing assessments, you're kind of looking for red flags, and my last job was a nursing professor, and I'd actually have a red flag in my scrub pants when I was teaching my students, and I'd bring that sucker out and throw it up in the air and throw it on the ground. And like, hey, there's a red flag, so if there's a young person listening and they're still trying to find their way, but obviously there was red flags that you didn't know, and you used the word naive, and maybe you got into thinking that you could perhaps fix or, help the person in your relationship early on. But what would you tell yourself if you go back to when you first started that relationship and you saw these red flags coming? Would you have done something different? Or did that experience, kind of like to the quote, make you who you are? So I'm asking you kind of two different questions. And then on the flip side, or maybe just a different question, what advice would you give to a young person that's already like, hey, I'm just starting out, but I'm seeing these red flags?
It's a really good questions. And the way that I'd like to answer that is if you are somebody who is a nurturer and a giver and a caretaker by your natural ability, that's okay, but you have to learn to fill up your cup first. If you can't fill up your cup, you can't fill other people's cups up. And I wish I understood that when I was younger, when I was in the relationship, but at the same time, I'm thankful I didn't, because I learned a lot and it built me to who I am today. Something that I learned is that you cannot fix anybody and nobody can fix you. But if you're in a relationship with somebody, whether it's friends, family members, coworkers, or an intimate partner, you can try to help that person, but you cannot solve their problems for them. And that's vice versa. And that was the biggest issue, is whenever I saw a problem arise to the surface, I wanted to be the fixer. I wanted to fix it. And we would just bump heads all the time. So fill your cup first so you can give a reasonable amount. But if they're not giving, if the other person is not giving you back what you're offering, then you don't have to feel obligated to continue giving.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Let me keep going with this here a little bit, because I think it's good stuff for people to take in. Let's flip it over, and like, instead of red flags, of like green lights, I guess we'll say. I've never even used this, so it's just coming off the top of my head. But so what would a healthy relationship look like for a young person who doesn't have any experience of like, hey, this is good, and this is healthy. I just want to use that word. What does that mean to you?
Two people fully accepting each other for who they are. My ex from my last relationship tried to change me and tried to shape me and mold me into who he thought I should be. But at the end of the day, he wasn't respecting me. He wasn't trying to appreciate me for who I am in that moment. And I think those are really unhealthy signs. But when you're with somebody and they appreciate you and all the small things in between. For example, if one person is a night owl and the other person is a morning person, and that's totally fine, but it's learning to understand and appreciate that and to really be open. we're human, we grow. If I looked at myself 5 years ago, I would be a completely different person. And if you're going to commit to being with somebody, you have to commit to learning to love all of that person and as they grow, because we're always evolving. We're not going to be the same as we were when we're 15 versus 25. That's a lot of growth. So you have to learn to appreciate and love that person for who they are and who they're going to become.
Mm, I like that. I like that. Let's get in. Normally we start out the show with you can take it any which way you want. But what was life like growing up?
It was it was different than most kids I grew up with. My parents are from Poland originally, and they moved to America when they were 18. So they taught us Polish. I went to school, didn't really know English that well. And it was hard because my parents worked hard. I can't say it was hard, but I'll change this around. It was different than most kids that I grew up with. My parents did everything they could to provide for my brother and I, and I'm forever thankful for that. But when it came to communication, talking about emotions and motivation, that just wasn't a conversation. So that was something I actually had to learn through being in dance class, because I remember I would hang out with kids in my neighborhood and they were not the best influences. And my parents knew that, but they also didn't tell me that they weren't the best influences. So then I got myself doing things I shouldn't be doing, like drinking at a young age or sneaking out at night. And then I noticed that those were bad habits and they were starting to take me backwards. So then I completely left those social circles and put my nose in dance, and I stayed at the dance studio. And that's where I had to learn discipline and motivation and how to be more positive.
Mm, mm. Well, luckily that component was in your life at that time, kind of when you needed it, and has given you a lot of strength, and I'm sure helped you again be who you are, today. So yeah, really cool. And, again, Mike and I, it was dance for you, basketball kind of for us, and coaching. So yeah, I think it's so important for people to realize that there is something out there for them, that one thing that can give them those ingredients that they need to just make sense of life. So the show is called Life's Essential Ingredients. And if you were to boil those down to whatever, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to pick, what are those for you at this point in your life?
First one, I would say never stop dating yourself. It's so easy to say, I want to be in a relationship, or I want a really close friend that I can talk with, or I want a cool boss that I can relate with and have an easygoing relationship with. But the reality of it is you're not going to get any of those relationships right if you don't get the relationship right within yourself. It all starts with what you you tell yourself, how you feel, how you think, and how you treat yourself. I worked at the salon for about 4.5 years. It's so easy to get your hair done, nails done, eyelashes, Botox, all of that. But the problem is that nobody talked about the conversation you're having with yourself. Nobody talked about having people skills when you're working in a people business. And I always say the best thing you can do is cultivate a stable relationship with yourself. And then you can take that and pour it into other relationships.
So how do you do that right now at this point in your life? Like actual some hands-on tangible stuff, like the day-to-day stuff that you're doing that puts yourself in a position to just love yourself. What are those habits or practices or routine that you have that maybe the listener can take in and be like, yeah, that's cool. I can see how that could help me develop my best version of my current self.
Yeah, so I really like to start my days by listening to some kind of motivational podcast, and that really helps get me grounded for the day. Gratitude is a really big one for me, being thankful for what we have. I think a lot of times, us as humans, we don't take the time to appreciate what we have because we're always setting the bar higher for ourselves. We're always setting a higher goal, a higher bar, but the reality is we need to appreciate and congratulate ourselves for the progress that we have made. Instead of continuing to set the bar higher, take a few minutes to see how far you've come. You'll be amazed at what you've been able to create. So, a good motivational podcast, gratitude. I love to go for long walks or bike rides, and then I'll work for a little bit and really take time for myself or see a friend that I know can add value to me and a friend that I can add value to. Because that's also really important. You can have as many friends as you want, but make sure you're choosing the friends that are adding value to you. If they're not adding value to you, you got to get new friends. You've all heard this. You are the average of the 5 people you associate with. And that's so true. Because if I didn't have I'm very thankful that I had dancing growing up. If I didn't have dancing growing up, I would have stumbled backwards really fast. And I remember I even took 2 years off of a break away from dance, and I hung out with the kids that I knew I shouldn't be hanging out with, and it wasn't good. So after those 2 years, I stopped hanging out with them completely and went to the dance studio, and your social circle really does matter.
For sure. For sure. And I love you talking about adding value. Again, this podcast is part of this nonprofit called C4 Leaders. And those are the 4 C's of how I live my life. And the second one is chemistry. And I define that as developing trust in yourself to bring and receive value from the connections in your life. And it's just that's where I think we speak a lot of the same language and into the same stuff. And then getting ready for I listened to you on another podcast, and then just looking at your site and everything. And you use the word neuroscience quite often in listening to you on a podcast. What do you mean by that, and how has that helped you, and how do you use that in your practices?
The biggest thing and the most important aspect is your thoughts. You are what you become. And I'm a firm believer in that. We all have 2 options every single day. You can think negative or you can think positive, but you can't think both. You can believe in 2 things that you can't see. You can believe in faith or you can believe in fear, but you can't believe in both. And it really does start with how to rewire your mind, because I was in a really abusive and a really unhealthy relationship where he was constantly bringing me down, suppressing my feelings, telling me I'm the problem all the time. And I started to believe those things because he was making me so crazy. And after that relationship, I really had to rebuild myself and my mindset. And that just goes back to, what are you telling yourself? Are you creating boundaries with people? It's those things that people don't talk about enough. The first time I heard the word boundaries, I was 23 years old when I already left my last relationship. And I met this guy just traveling abroad, and he was like, "Bro, you need boundaries." And I was like, "That's so cool. What is that?" And I had absolutely no idea. So it goes back to learning to rewire your mind. And I want to tell people it's okay to take the road less traveled, because it's not always going to be like that. You will, when you want to create a new path for yourself, I want people to know it's okay. I want people to know it's doable. And it's not going to be easy at first, and it might get lonely for a short period of time, but it's only because you're letting go of the low-hanging fruit. And eventually you will get the fruit on top of the tree, and you'll get there.
Man, yeah, I really appreciate everything that you're saying. And I don't mean to go backwards so much, but yeah, it's a tricky space. Mike's a high school basketball coach. I've been a high school basketball coach, and worked with all different kind of athletes. But I feel like there's such a gap in you saying that you never really had much education around the space of boundaries. What advice would you give if there's a teacher listening in that's teaching high school kids at this time, or even junior high, um, about trying to give empowerment to these young people or figuring out life? I mean, and I know that's a broad question, but what if you were called into this classroom right now, what tip would you give them around boundaries?
There's only two things you can control in this life. It's your actions and your attitudes. You can't control what anyone else says or does. You can only encourage people on what they could do. But at the end of the day, you can bring a horse to the water, but you can't make the horse drink the water. So as long as you are controlling your actions and your attitudes, then the rest will be figured out. You're going to find your people, you're going to find your path, but don't try to control people, because my ex tried to control me. I tried to control him. Heads clashed every single day, all day, and it didn't get us anywhere. So focus on being your best self. You don't have to do a 180 overnight, and you're not going to. But let's say you want to eat healthier. Choose healthier food options and become 1% better every day, whether it's adding more water drinking more water with your meals, or adding something healthier. If you want to start thinking more positively, say one positive affirmation a day to yourself. That's 1% better. It doesn't matter what little Johnny's doing over here or Susie's doing over there. What matters is that you're being 1% better, and that's what matters the most.
I like that. Again, great tips. Let's get in your book real quick. First of all, congrats on it. How good did that feel to have that thought and say, you know what, I'm going to take action and bring this baby to life and share it with the world, and just having the courage to do so. So yeah, how did it feel to get your copy of it?
It was a really interesting process. Coming from my original background, I was a hairstylist working and living in Chicago. And I decided that I was going to leave the salon, and I booked a one-way ticket to Mexico, and I didn't know anybody, didn't know the language, didn't know where I was going. I just kind of, like I told you before, I heard the tacos were good, and I was like, I'm going to go to Mexico City. So I actually stayed in hostels for 2 months. And when I was in those hostels, I was motivated to stay there because I needed to meet people, get familiar with the area. But I also said that I wanted to write my book while I was living in the hostels. And then once I'm done writing, then I can find a roommate, because it'll feel like more rewarding, like a congratulations for myself. And that's what I did. So it was interesting because it was different people coming and going. But one of the biggest blessings of writing the book in the hostels was I met a lot of writers actually from all over the world. And I think a lot of times it's really looked down to stay at hostels, or even when you're traveling, especially coming from the US. But it's such a blessing because you meet an incredible amount of people who have incredible talent. So I stayed there, and then I wrote the book, and then I published it, and then moved on and found a more stable place.
Nice. So what feedback that's actually we'll tell the listeners about it. I mean, I know it's some of the stuff we've been talking about, I'm sure, but sell yourself and sell the book so people can go out and go get it.
Yeah. So this book, it started based out of my struggles with rewiring my mindset from negative to positive. And it really started with positive affirmations and gratitude journaling, because my last relationship, he was always telling me the opposite of what I wanted to hear and what I needed to hear. So it's a 31-day positive affirmation book, and it has action steps for each day on things that you can do and reflect on. And then there's space to journal in there as well. So it's mainly to start thinking positive and to start rewiring your mindset. There were so many times I would look in the mirror and I would try to tell myself positive affirmations, but I didn't believe it. but I forced myself to say it. And the more I said it, the more I started to believe it, and the more it reflected on the outside.
No, very cool. Are you still journaling? Are you journaling every day? Do you do that? Is that part of your practice or?
Yeah, or if I don't journal that day, I learned this one tip from a friend, and she said, when you journal or write down your positive affirmations, record yourself saying it, and then listen to it the first thing you do when you wake up and the last thing you do before you go to bed. So then you're also programming that subconscious mind to be familiar with those positive affirmations that you put into your mind.
Mm, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'm not so good right now, but my good friend Lane Hensley back in 2011 started teaching me about journaling. And I was really good at it for a while. For some reason, in the last few months, I'm not doing it as much. I need to get back to it. But for probably the last, I don't know, 2 years, when I was being more consistent, a little bit goofy kind of way to do it. But I like to get up early, go walk, and then have a cup of coffee, and then sit there and just kind of be for a little bit of meditation and stuff. And then I would get my journal out and I would write a letter to myself.
Wow.
And just simple. Sometimes it would be, a whole page, which is not a big, it's probably like a 5x7 kind of journal. So not a huge page. And then other times it might just be one sentence, but I would try and think, hey, what is it that Jeff needs on this day? And then kind of like your affirmations, or maybe there was something that I needed to let go of that I was carrying for some reason throughout the night and didn't sleep well and get up and just feel kind of off. And it's like, all right, I don't really want to carry that anymore. And so allowing myself some grace and forgiveness to be able to put that down on paper and then be like, all right, I'm going to move on from that. Or on the positive side, hey, here's what I'm doing today. Here's what you got going on, Jeff, and go out and get after it. And so, I need to, just listening to you, I got to get back to doing that. But I do want to have you get your thoughts on, I know you've talked about some toxic relationships and things, and talk about forgiveness and maybe how, important that is, and any insight for a listener perhaps who's just doesn't see that light yet, just not able to enter that space of forgiveness. What tips would you give them?
That goes back to not taking things personal, because as much as you think you know somebody, you don't know them fully. You're not going to know all of their childhood trauma. Even if they talk to you about it, you're not going to know everything. You're not going to know what their life was like growing up. You're not going to know everything about their last relationship. And I think once you understand that, how they treated you is not a reflection of you. It was a reflection of what they're holding in. It really gives you the grace and compassion towards that person. I remember my ex and we got married when I was 21, and I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but I did it anyway. And when I was 23, I said, this is too much. This is chaotic. I need to get out and go my own way. So we went our own ways. And I think the last time that I saw him, I looked him in the face. I said, you hurt me a lot, but I forgive you for it. And then I left. And I think that's the most freeing thing, is just understanding it's not your fault. You did what you could, and you shouldn't take it personal. Learn to forgive. And if you're not ready to fully forgive that person, forgive what was around it. We lived in an apartment really close to Chicago, and I would forgive the building, forgive the parking lot, forgive all the stuff that we had in the house, like the bed, the couch. And then when you get to forgiving that person, then it'll be easier because you've already forgiven the place where the hurt happened.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, getting deep. And obviously that just leads to, I don't know if it's the first step, but you talked in your intro that I was, talking about you helping people kind of just heal, and transform, and this holistic wellness, and emotional healing. Is there any other tips in that space? I know we keep probably covered it at this point, but is there any, because it's a powerful word, and I don't know if you're familiar with this Japanese word called kintsugi. Have you come across that?
No.
Yeah, you're gonna love this. And it's an ancient art form that culture has been practicing since like the 9th century. And so they would take a beautiful artifact such as a vase, and they'd intentionally break it, and then they'd clean it up, and they'd put some lacquer and some 24 karat gold, and then they'd put it back together and make it stronger than it was before.
Wow.
And so many times, and a lot of people in the space, C4 leaders, I don't do it now because I'm using pizza. But I used to talk more about being broken, and I did a lot of cool stuff with this kintsugi, and I know sometimes people would get pissed, man, I'm not broken. And everybody has their way to interpret that word, but I always like the word because it gives us a chance to heal. And most of the time when we do heal, we are stronger than we were before. And so, yeah, something maybe for you to check out, but it's kintsugi. Yeah, is the word. Let's get into your podcast. So, talk about that and what you love about doing it, and get the listeners hyped up to check out your show.
Yeah, it's called Nourished Inside Out. And I call it Nourished Inside Out because, like I mentioned before, working at the salon, it's so easy to work on the physical appearances. And I think that's great, but I really want to educate people about the internal work and how to take care of themselves from the inside out, how to create emotional stability, how to be mentally strong and stable, how to give yourself the proper nutrition if that's the case, whether we're talking with a nutritionist or a sex therapist or a psychologist. There's so much education that I needed during challenging times with my ex-husband that now I want to learn about those things and share them with others. So we release an episode every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and it's always something new. So it's available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts at.
Man, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
So that's what you're doing for work then, because
yeah.
That's a lot of work. Man. How long are your episodes?
About 35 to 50 minutes.
Wow. And you have a guest
every episode.
Wow, man. You're researching the guest and obviously getting prepared for the show and everything.
Everything.
That's a full-time job for you then.
That's what I do. I write and I talk.
Yeah. Are you, not to get too personal, but are you making money from your show? Is that what you're trying to monetize it?
Yeah.
Man, good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah. When this show started, I was doing, I think, an episode a week, but it would take me a good 2-3 hours to kind of research because you're listening to a couple podcasts, going to their YouTube, doing all that stuff. And so, oh man, this is a lot of work. And I was still doing all kind of other stuff at that time, nursing job and everything. So I was like, so I cut back to every other week. And then now it's more kind of random for us, which I like a lot better. But hey, I do want to ask you one more question, and then we'll get out with this legacy kind of statement. And I don't know if you've ever been asked this or not before, but I used to ask this all the time when we first started. But decision making, do you have? And it's a little bit of a crazy question, but do you have a process for how you make decisions? Kind of, and I'm not giving you much to go on with that. Obviously, not like you're going to the store, you're going out and get your tacos that you love. Obviously, I'm talking about how you use your time, maybe, or who you surround yourself with. Do you have any criteria or a way that you look at, hey, is this a good use of my skills, my energy, my time?
Yeah, so first I really look at what's priority and what's not. And I work around that. So for me, work is priority and writing. So I prioritize those into my day. But then when it comes to friends, I don't really hang out with like people a lot or very often, maybe like once every other week or twice a month or something like that. But I don't really hang out with people too much because I'm also really cautious of my energy and who I share it with. I've been such a giver to so many people, and it's been taken advantage of so many times from my previous relationship, my previous ex-best friends, and previous jobs, even. And I know that I'm somebody that I feed off energy fast. Like, I'll give you this example. My first roommate in Mexico, she was a morning person. She wakes up early, she goes to the gym, she works, and then she'll go socialize later in the evening. And then I meet my second roommate, and she's like, yeah, I wake up at 10 or 11, and then I like drink my coffee at 9 p.m., and then I work until 5 a.m. So then that's what I was doing. I went from complete morning person to night owl. So it's really being aware. When it comes to decision making, be aware. Is this going to add value to me or is it not? Is it going to push me to be 1% better or is it going to push me backwards? Because at the end of the day, we're either growing or we're dying. We're never staying the same. You're either getting better or you're not getting better. And that's a conscious choice that you need to make every day.
It's a good one. All right. Which leads us, we always get out the same way. There's a quote that I love from John Austin. The only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. And you're a young person. I'm going to give you another 60, 70 years of living. But now you're on your deathbed and you're surrounded by the people that love you. You're getting ready to take your last breath. What is it that you want people to know that you stood for and that you leave behind with them as you get ready to go home, so to say?
Integrity and resilience. Do what you say you're going to do. Be who you say you are. And don't give up. It's like, put in your vocabulary, I don't know how to give up. I don't know how to give up. Every time I fall down, I'm going to stand up. Every time I get faced with the setback, thank God, because it's going to reroute me to something better. Every time this person is mean to me, thank God it gives me the opportunity to get mentally stronger. So learn resilience and integrity.
Love it. All right, listeners. Hey, again, we're on with Aneta. Go to her site, bio.site/nourished Inside Out. You can check out her blog, get her book, listen to her podcast, and everything else. And thank you so much for being our guest. I learned a lot. I got 2.5 pages of notes from you, and I'm so glad that you're sharing your story and doing what you do and nourishing people all over the world. So thanks again for being our guest.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure, Jeff.
All right, listeners. Boom, baby. That just happened. We out.